Now finally, the last of Sinnoh's Lake Guardian, Uxie, otherwise known as the only member of the Pixie Trio with Pixie in its name, and the only member of that same trio to seemingly be asleep. And finally, the most likely of the trio to cause the debate over pronunciation. Is it Uxie or Uxie? The world wonders, until you check out the 3DS Pokédex pronunciation, which reveals that it is officially Uxie. Also, those who played Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky will also remember when the Groudon fought mid-game turned out to be an illusion caused by Uxie. Sadly, that ability never transferred over to the other games, but Uxie is pretty cool regardless, especially since it was from the most breathtaking of the Sinnoh lakes, Lake Equity. Today we'll be examining how Uxie performed in the competitive scene, and so we ask, how good was Uxie actually? And in this video we'll be going over these competitive formats. Though Uxie was not a true OU Pokemon, it still had a genuine excellent niche in the 4th generation of OU. With its incredible defensive stats and bevy of terrific utility moves, it was able to fill a number of excellent supporting roles and facilitated several excellent successful teams, starting games off well in the lead slot. At first it vacillated between two different sets, both of which were able to throw the opponent off, and which had enough variety between them to keep the opponent guessing. The first set was the Trick Choice Scarf variant, which completely ruined faster taunt attempts from Aerodactyl and fellow Pixie Azelf, while also crippling bulkier elites like Swampert, Hippowdon, and Fortress. Uxie would then easily get Stealth Rock up and U-turn to bring in a teammate, having laid a great opening foundation. Mid-game, it was able to continue providing value by safely switching in against threats such as Infernape. Uxie's lack of recovery meant it wasn't a permanent counter to much, but it was still immensely useful for its massive bulk, allowing it to ward such threats off before safely U-turning to a teammate again. The other main set, the Dual Screener, played similarly in this regard, but the way it messed with the opposing team was different. Instead of directly crippling an opponent with the Trick Choice Scarf, Uxie would make its already dangerous offensive teammates downright terrifying with light clay extended screens. It was excellent at this role not just because it started the game off with them, but because its fantastic bulk, useful resist, and deceptively high speed allowed it to come back in once or even twice more later in the game to set the screens again. The offensive onslaught of the likes of Dragon Dance Salamence and offensive Calm Mind Suicune when supported by screens was simply staggering. They tore through teams with even greater ease when they were able to shrug off counterattacks so reliably. Suicune in particular was noted for being utterly unkillable with Reflect and Light Screen up. Another reason Uxie was such an effective lead was that the rise of lead Machamp actually helped it, since it matched up well against the 4-armed beast. Some players even used Lumberry Stealth Rock supporters to defeat both Machamp and Roserade. Uxie was actually faster than Rose when given investment, to the surprise of many who expected it to be a slow wall like Cresselia. This Uxie was also effective mid-game, letting Uxie more reliably check Pokemon like Lucario. These Uxie sets saw intermittent usage. They were solid and saw some tournament success, but they did not fit on every type of team. Eventually, they were displaced by a new Uxie set that was more generally reliable in and of itself, thus fitting on more teams. A simple, bulky Stealth Rocker with leftovers, most similarly to the occasional Lumberry set, who played just like the other Uxie variants, but whose main method of team support was Thunder Wave. This gave Uxie new life on Paralysis offense team. It was the perfect partner for the terrifying duo of Dynamic Punch Machamp and Ironhead Jirachi. Running lefties also significantly improved Uxie's ability to ward off threats mid-game. Its ability to switch into the terrifying Breloom was particularly valuable. Some players even experimented with knockoff as a last move on Uxie, as removing opposing bulky Pokemon's leftovers made it easier for Uxie's teammates to break through, and this helped make up for one of Uxie's shortcomings, in that it usually wasn't great against more defensive teams, but not threatening Trick Scarf. With this bulkier paralysis-focused variant, Uxie reliably facilitated a ton of great bulky offense and balance teams, and enjoyed consistent tournament usage and success. It also saw use on certain offensive Rain Dance teams, as the same qualities that made it such a great dual screener served it to make an excellent rain setter as well. Uxie was undeniably one of the best non-OU Pokemon to use in OU. Now, Uxie was quite good in OU, but in UU it was absolutely amazing and one of the tier's most popular defining Pokemon. Its multiple excellent support sets in use in OU like Trick Scarf, Dual Screens, Paralysis Spreader, Rain Setter were even more reliable in the tier below, given UU's significantly lower power level and lack of permanent Sandstorm. Uxie was a highly reliable defensive presence in the UU metagame, as it devoured hits from just about the entire tier, providing a great option for its frailer teammates to fall back on before Uxie easily brought them back in with U-turn. Its resistance to fighting and psychic and its immunity to ground were excellent, but it easily shrugged off most neutral hits as well, and even powerful super effective stab attacks, such as those from Scyther and Mismagius, which not only didn't threaten one-hit KOs, but didn't couldn't even come close. Weaker super effective hits bounced right off of it. Now of course Uxie's lack of a reliable recovery meant it wasn't immovable, but it still took a ton of effort to bring it down, and thus made for an excellent choice on offensive and defensive teams alike. Plus, if one really wanted Uxie to nearly never die, they merely needed to provide it with wish support from Clefable, who would easily pass a wish off to Uxie if and when the opponent tried to switch a fighting type in against it. Uxie wasn't just incredible support though. If it wanted, it could pull off several great offensive sets. It could do this through a more offensively invested Stealth Rock set, which differentiated itself from its more powerful Pixie counterpart, Mesprit, with higher speed, better bulk, and surprise factor. It was effective even without the surprise, but being able to score unexpected KOs with Energy Ball against the likes of Rhyperior and Amistar made it even better. Alternatively, Uxie could go with a number of excellent Calm Mind sets that were brutally efficient late game cleaners. Support Uxie usually didn't last to the end of battle since it was tasked with taking so many hits. However, when one used Uxie in a calm minding role and thus preserved it for later in the game, it demonstrated just how incredible it was in such a situation, as it was able to reliably go on one-on-one with opposing late game offensive cleaners. This also gave its user time to remove Uxie checks like Registeel. Once this was done, Uxie was able to cleave through weakened teams. It could go for maximum coverage with 3 attacks, it could use substitute to block status like Milotic's Toxic, or it could use rest to give itself more longevity, allowing it to be used defensively as well before it was ready to sweep. It was most commonly seen with a Chesto Berry, so it could fit in a second coverage move, but sometimes it ran even a rest talk set with leftovers, which was excellent. It required dark types to be removed entirely, but that wasn't anything unreasonable, and in return Uxie became one of the most reliable sleep absorbers against Tier King Venusaur. Overall, Uxie really did it all in Generation 4 UU. It was one of the best, most consistent, and defining Pokemon in the metagame. The absurd power creep of Generation 5 meant Uxie wasn't able to find any sort of legitimate role in OU or even UU. However, Gen 5 RU was noted for its similarity to Gen 4 UU, and it was in this environment that Uxie thrived. Its bulky set was useful as ever, helping against opposing threats while supporting its own teams through Stealth Rock, U-Turn, and Thunder Wave. However, it was the substitute Calm Mind variant that became Uxie's flagship set. It's set up with ridiculous ease against the plethora of weak defensive Pokemon, such as Alomomola and Amoonguss, that were absolutely everywhere. Once its checks had been worn down or removed, which wasn't hard to do since they were all hit by spikes, Uxie would sweep all sorts of teams with ease, with its speed proving useful by outrunning popular offensive Pokemon like Moltres and Kabutops, while defensive Pokemon struggled to even break its substitute. Even when using a sub-Calm Mind set that required it to hang back and stay at high health for the best odds of a sweep, Uxie was still good defensively. For example, it was naturally bulky enough to pivot into attacks like Emboar's Superpower or Medichamp's Zen Headbutt, and still remain healthy enough to pose a threat. Plus, the presence of Alomomola was beneficial for Uxie in more ways than just opponent's Mola providing setup fodder. Uxie could partner up with Alomomola itself, and the big fish can make up for Uxie's lack of a recovery, accentuated by use of substitute, by passing its trademark enormous wishes to it, with the new wish mechanics ensuring that Uxie would just about always be healed back up to full, thus allowing Uxie to actually see mid-game use without necessarily compromising its ability to sweep late game. To make things even better, Uxie could do more than sub Calm Mind or Stealth Rock support. Both these sets were most effective on bulky offense and balance teams, but Uxie could also fit nicely into more aggressive hyper offense teams by supporting setup sweepers through dual screens, or reliably setting up Rain Dance for swift swimmers. Overall, Uxie was an excellent Pokemon in Gen 5 RU, and proved its versatility beyond a shadow of a doubt. Its support was always great, but it was its substitute Calm Mind set that ranked amongst the most dangerous sweepers in the tier. Uxie started off Generation 6 in NU, and there it was excellent. The biggest change it made was using Colbur Berry often to combat the influx of the newly buffed knockoff, but other than that, it largely reprised its role from the previous 2 generations. As always, it was a reliable support Pokemon, capable of checking several prominent threats, notably the dangerous fighting types, but it also made excellent use of several variants of Calm Mind. Sub was popular, Rest Talk was particularly effective alongside the chip damage machine that was dual Spikes Rocky Helmet Garbodor, and 3 attacks with max special attack investment was useful as well, with the powerful Signal Beam taking Malamar by surprise. Some players even utilized the most aggressive Uxie to date, with an all-out attacking Expert Belt set, which used Power Creep super effective coverage to smash holes in the opposing team. Mega Camerupt was doused by Water Pulse, while Ferroseed and Klinklang would get eviscerated by Hidden Power Fire. Uxie was one of the absolute best Pokemon in the tier. Its ability to provide nigh peerless utility, or act as a danger sweeper, or potentially even both, allowed it to to fit on just about every team in some capacity. Sadly, Uxie was unable to continue excelling in and shaping NU because it was so good in the tier above that it started seeing enough usage to become RU proper. Uxie's role in this metagame was entirely centered around its bulk. It couldn't really run offensive sets because its utility with a defensive set was far too important. It was the only Pokemon in the tier that could truly answer Medicham. This was important because RU was ruled by balanced teams, and it was imperative that they were not at risk of losing a Pokemon every time Medicham hit the field against a Pokemon it threatened out, which was the case for every team without Uxie or Spiritomb, technically. But Spiritomb did not possess Uxie's set of utility tools that made it such a great addition to teams even beyond its ability to answer Medicham. Besides the obligatory Stealth Rock, Uxie could also run Heal Bell, another common move on balanced teams, to relieve pressure in the Scald and Toxic Wars common in battles against opposing balance. However, though it was nice to have the option in order to potentially free up slots in team building, Uxie didn't need to run the move, as balanced teams were often able to fit Heal Bell elsewhere, usually on Diancie, and preferred Uxie to run Thunder Wave to slow down fast threats that would otherwise threaten the many slow Pokemon on balance. Though Uxie's lack of a recovery may have seemed out of place on balanced teams, which regularly engaged in lengthy battles of attrition, such teams were easily able to compensate for this shortcoming thanks to tier staple Alomamola's huge wishes. This allowed Uxie to continuously check Medicham, as well as several other top tier Pokemon such as Venusaur and Virizion. It also gave it more freedom in potentially running Colbur Berry as its item, making it less vulnerable to early pursuits and allowing it to check the likes of Sock and Girder more reliably. Overall, Uxie wound up as one of the most important defensive Pokemon in RU, capping off another excellent generation. Even great Pokemon often have rough generations, and Uxie certainly had one in Gen 7. It started out in NU, where it struggled to make an impact. Its inability to bypass Xatu was a significant hindrance for what was supposed to be a reliable Stealth Rocker, and its defensive utility was severely limited in a metagame so utterly dominated by powerful Dark and Ghost types. Uxie didn't counter as many Pokemon as it had in the past, and was not an effective answer to any top tier Pokemon at all. It didn't even answer Passimian reliably, given how it would just eat a U-turn and get chipped, as opposed to Slowbro, who would regenerate the hit off and even potentially chip Passimian with Rocky Helmet. Thus, it was not worth Uxie letting in these dangerous Pokemon as easily as it did, especially when it was consistently not even getting rocks. In a truly perplexing turn of events, Uxie didn't drop out of NU, but actually moved up to RU, and there, it was also not good. It wasn't quite as dismal as it had become in NU, because at least there were several poison types that Uxie could check decently, as well as a few fighters and Necrozma. The problem was that Uxie simply didn't check these Pokemon well enough to justify its utter passivity. Its lack of longevity meant it was prone to getting bowled over to repeated hits, especially with Z moves in the picture. Once again, Slowbro and its Regenerator served to more or less outclass it in this regard, while other defensive staples such as Registeel and Bronzong were more able to shrug off common direct and indirect damage more easily, despite their lack of recovery. Uxie also wasn't the most reliable Stealth Rocker. It didn't match up well at all against common anti-hazard options in the Fog Mandibuzz and Rapid Spin Mega Blastoise, making it even less valuable when it somewhat struggled to get on the field to begin with. It's a shame Uxie wasn't given an opportunity to drop to PU where it would have shown. Popularity really is a double-edged sword, much like using Uxie to counter, well, anything in Gen 7 RU or NU. Upon joining Generation 8 in the Crown Tundra, Uxie finally joined PU, and there it redeemed itself. Gen 8's removal of Z moves and Pursuit were massive boons for it, and the addition of heavy-duty boots to bypass Stealth Rock can actually be spun to Uxie's advantage. With Knockoff, it can potentially remove a Pokemon's boots, which can be taken advantage of in a number of ways. Even if it doesn't actually connect with its boots holding target, simply threatening the Knockoff can be enough for Uxie to land a U-turn and bring a teammate into a good position, such as giving Guzzlord a free turn to launch a Choice Banded attack. Knockoff is also effective in allowing Uxie to wear down and thus keep rocks against Rapid Spin Claydol. Wish support from Aromatisse, who also provides a crucial counter to Dark types, keeps Uxie healthy even if it chooses to run Colbur Berry over leftovers, as it often does to act as a better check to Toxicroak and Gallade. Uxie does have its problems though. Xatu is around and as eternal a roadblock as ever, especially as there's no pursuit to forcibly damage or remove it anymore. Uxie's passivity also means it competes directly with Mesprit, whose higher damage output and access to Healing Wish often outweigh Uxie's defensive superiority. However, Uxie is still a decent Pokemon in PU. In addition to the useful bulk on its standard set, Heal Bell is another excellent option to provide another unique form of team support, and screens being accentuated by Memento are terrific on fast-paced setup hyper offense. Now that said, it would be quite helpful if Uxie were to receive a new move or two when Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl come out, so it can go from fairly decent to the rock-solid Pokemon it was in generations before. And that's it. So how good was Uxie actually? Well, it was one of the best lower tier Pokemon ever for its first several generations of existence. A beacon of consistent team support that could also fire off an offensive attack, made even more dangerous by its surprise factor. It only hit a wall in Generation 7, where its popularity actively worked against it. Instead of letting it fall with the power creep, the player base somehow propelled it above the tier where it was already struggling to be of use, and it continued to revel in mediocrity for the rest of the generation. Gen 8 has been better in this regard, but it's still a far cry from spectacular. We really hope Game Freak gives all the Pixies some serious buffs come the Diamond and Pearl remakes, but none need and arguably deserve them more than Uxie. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content, and in the comments I want to know, what do you think about competitive Uxie? What type of changes do you want to see in the Gen 4 remakes for it? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. Also, thank you support of our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.